Hello and welcome to Tools in the Shed, a podcast powered by CarsGuide, ready to rip into car stuff that has caught our eye this week. I'm CarsGuide Deputy Editor James, and with me is News Editor Tung.
Howdy.
And regular contributor Byron.
Yay, I'm back. Hello.
This week we're looking at how Toyota's performance-focused GR HiLux is shaping up. A lot of interest around the potential for that car. We'll look at some fresh metal and look at a couple of ring-ins, an Aussie classic and Tung's recent purchase in the CarsGuide garage. And we'll look at someone who lives by the doctrine of promises made, promises kept-ish in this week's Muskwatch. So stay with us. But first, happily, we've had some feedback on last week's episode. And then we were talking about brands that are on the edge, the bottom of the list, as it were, in terms of new car sales in Australia. And we had a few, I think we were talking about Citroën and Peugeot and Fiat and Chrysler, and we put Genesis in there, even though it's a startup effectively. That was in that group of five as well. And Rico says, 4 out of 5 lowest selling brands in Australia, Stellantis off to a great start. And I've got to say, I've always thought that Stellantis sounds like a pharmaceutical company. It's making pills rather than cars. Is it the same with you guys? That it sounds just a bit odd as a name for an automotive company?
To me, it sounds like, yeah, absolutely. That's spot on, James. For me, it's pharmaceutical, but also for maybe for a rash or something that, might require a couple of weeks of antibiotics, like strong antibiotics to get rid of.
Okay, so you're suffering from Stellantis.
Exactly. It's like streptococcal family adjacent, maybe.
Yeah.
There is something very cold and corporate about that name, isn't it? It just feels like there's no passion behind that brand or that name. So it'd be interesting to see how they go.
Yeah.
And it sounds Greek to me. Like I'm thinking, Stellantis? Is that is that from the Parthenon?
It's an undersea city that, no one's actually been able to find just yet. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Peter Crott chipped in and said, look, the 500 did well when it came out, and he still thinks it's an awesome, if outdated, car, but it goes to FCA not doing enough. He calls it their typical thing in not replacing or cycling through their cars quickly enough to maintain customer loyalty, that by the time someone's had their stretch with an FCA product, there's nothing for them to think about as a fresh offering. So I thought that was an interesting point too.
He did. And the 500, actually, you may recall, guys, that it was relaunched in 2013 as a 13990 drive-away proposition. That thing, they must have lost pretty much like all their profit margins on that car selling it at that price.
That was a changeover from an independent distributor to a direct subsidiary from the factory. And I think there was a decision made, all right, if we're going to do this, we're going to make an investment in terms of pricing and get a bit of volume going. But it's just an old car now.
Yes,
Totally. The new generation one is electric, and we all know where Australia stands on electric cars. So it'd be interesting to see where FCA Australia takes the 500 in the future.
Yes, too true. Senior Bob says Fiat 500, the Vespa with a roof. I love it, but they are way too expensive, and he wasn't alone in saying that. DeCook, our old mate, said that a friend recently gave him a ride in a Mini Cooper S, loved the refinement, sharp ride, engine sound, blah, 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 but then I looked up the price and it's just insane, for a 3-door hatchback. And he says it's a similar story for the 500, that, if you look at it as the emperor has no clothes, what you're looking at is a small car, and the price is pretty substantial. So I think that's a fair point.
Fun fact, though, they make great second-hand buys. Manual only, by the way, because no one wants that dual logic automatic rubbish. But you can pick up like a 5-year-old 500 for well under 10K.
Yeah. And it's a super cute little car. And some of those limited edition versions are particularly appealing. Often limited editions are a sign of distress, but I think some of those were just celebrating the fun nature of the car. I'm thinking of the one that looked like it had steel wheels with a little hubcap in the
Anniversario.
That Adversario, I particularly like that one.
Yep.
For what it's worth. Now, Pranav Shroti said, very interesting topic in terms of looking at these brands that were at the other end of the scale. FCA Group is struggling in the Indian market as well. He says, so, Pranav joins us from India. Jeep showed lots of promise, but it went off the boil. Fiat left. Citroën seems interested, but no concrete launch dates. So I don't think Citroën's in the Indian market at the moment. Wonder if there's a leadership issue. And I wonder if there's actually a looming leadership issue when you think about the merging of such a French company with a US/Italian company. Culturally, there's going to be some challenges, I think, in bringing those two things together.
Yeah, definitely. I can't imagine that. I'd like to think it would be the United Nations of the European car industry / American car industry. But what do you reckon, guys? I think there's a lot of egos there, Americans, Italians.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about Chrysler's time with Daimler, and that didn't work out so well. I don't know what was happening in the back room, who knows, but just two very different styles of company trying to form one entity. And this one, you've got 2 or 3 different very strong cultures trying to marry up. So whoever's looking after all of that has their work cut out for them, I reckon.
Just to play devil's advocate, though, I think if you try to look at the bigger picture, FCA is quite strong in America, in the North American market, and Peugeot Citroën is quite strong with the European market. So there's not much overlap between market share of those two brands. So maybe this could be a marriage made in heaven, and it could make them both stronger.
I think, as we've touched on before, the North American market, the US in particular, is very demanding when it comes to customer service, and they want to be treated well. They want their product to be reliable, and that's often a challenge for people coming into North America if they've been away for a while, as Peugeot has been. It's a shock, the demand that market makes on you in terms of after sales. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. Just further to the comment about Jeep in India as well, just as an aside, our Jeep FCA Australia's current CEO ran Jeep of India and set up the factory that builds the Compass. That's right, Kevin Flynn. So, and he left and came here. So perhaps he was a driving force in India that they're missing now. So let's see if FCA can ramp themselves back up to, well, Jeep does well in Australia, but they can do better.
Yeah, definitely. Now, we then moved some commentary on the cars that we had in the garage last week, and Crafty had been driving the new Toyota Fortuner, and Bertie, our old mate Bertie, proud Victorian, you guys will be pleased to know, he says he just saw Crafty's review on the Fortuner. The front looks better, however, its side profile is woeful. It looks like a 75 Corona plonked on a 4x4 chassis, like the 1979 Overland wagon with the HZ as a donor car. And that was a great memory that brought up. People on YouTube, I managed to grab some photographs of the Overland, Overlander, I think it was actually called. So that was a Tasmanian company that struck an arrangement with Holden and put a full-on off-road 4x4 underpinning under HZ wagon, van and ute, and it's sold in very small numbers, but they're super distinctive. So interesting take on the Fortuner from Bertie there.
Have you ever seen an Overlander in your time? No,
I've only ever seen photographs. I've never seen one.
I remember reading about it back in the day in the magazines in Modern Motor and Wheels, and I always thought, wow, why can't they just build this in the factory like this?
It'd be unreal. It would be huge fun. It's almost like you pulled a prank on people,
Yeah.
Sukhoi Romantic. Now, I knew Sukhoi rang a bell. It's a Russian aircraft manufacturer, of course, and I was looking through them. It's an Su-35, looks pretty dangerous as a fighter plane. So there you go. Said they should call the Fortuner the HiLux Surf, and of course that's got some history behind it. And Bertie thought they simply need a gaudy sticker pack, some weird seat trim, and they'd have a 4Runner. So I think what that goes to is the sentiment that Fortuner may be an impediment for that car. Why not HiLux 7? or call it the Forerunner, or call it the HiLux Surf or something. But anyway, interesting thoughts.
It's worked quite well with Mitsubishi, calling their their SUV Pajero Sport. You can tap into an existing nameplate. There's marketing overlap there, so there is definitely precedence.
Yeah, definitely.
It's the Ford Endura jinx, isn't it? Like, just terrible name. It's Fortuna, which probably pleases Ford because they would allow to use Edge, because Toyota used the name Edge for Endura, and now Toyota has a similar problem with Fortuna. So.
Yeah. Well, it's a chicken or the egg thing, isn't it? Is the name on the nose because of the vehicle, or is the vehicle on the nose because of the name? It's hard to say. Yeah. Then we got into some more general feedback, and DeCook raised it. He said he thought we might have been shooting in the southerly buster that came through last Thursday, because my Wi-Fi was so appalling, and I've got to put out a general apology that it was super frustrating. And you might notice I've gone to a different location for this week, and I apologise to DeCook and everybody else who was watching or listening last week. It was pretty tragic. So hopefully we're doing better this week. Jim Danick said, not sure that you have to change the podcast name, because Holmes Wilson had said that we should change it to Three Wankers Talk Shit. He said, look, Jim Danick reckons that Tools in the Shed seems very appropriate, but he says in brackets, seriously, the best car podcast. So thank you very much for that, Jim.
Thank you.
Look, FBG Slug said, always great to hear Crafty, 4x4 OG, which I take to mean original gangster. And if Crafty is the original gangster of 4x4, that's for sure. So thank you, FBG Slug. And Birdie came in again and said, now I get it. The old MG stood for Morris Garages. The new Chinese MG stands for monosodium glutamate, because Jim Danick had been talking about how it was a smorgasbord of MG offerings and what he wanted to choose from the menu. So that's what that's about. Now, what do we got now? Let's see if says, recramped cities. Do you ever think that the very light cars like the Canto, Ignis, Mirage, that class of car, will ever make a comeback? A la Hyundai Getz, when it was popular. I've got to say that's 15 years ago, when the Getz was really in its prime. Is it done and dusted and gone forever, or what do you guys think? Do you think a small car like that could make a comeback?
100%. And I think the future in that class is simply in EVs. Small city runabouts, with huge charging stations. You can plug it in, drive around the city, 200 kilometers of range, no problem at all.
Yep.
That's
an
my
interesting
personal opinion.
That is an interesting thought. Byron, what do you think?
Yes, I completely agree with Tung. That is very much the way I think the long-term future of this segment will go. But in the midterm, I believe the Kia Picanto certainly makes money for Kia, and is the dominating force. I think it's 60 or 70% of that segment, and it is about to get higher because there's more entrants leave. I think that that car proves that a price point plus quality works. If they crossoverify that sort of car in a way that Hyundai kind of intended with the Venue, but they couldn't quite get the pricing down low enough yet, then that's where I think the future will be. So I think a higher riding, 3.5 meter hatchback certainly would kick ass in.
And to Tung's point, probably electrified, if not full EV, hybrid in the shorter term.
Yeah, and of course that's a natural fit because of urban requirements for noise and pollution, and also the fact that people would respond, particularly if it looks like if it's a hipster looking, retro inspired 500-esque thing. Yeah,
Byron, it sounds like from what you're describing, it sounds like you're talking about the Suzuki Ignis. That's a jacked up light hatchback with quirky styling.
Yeah, and the Ignis, unfortunately, is too expensive, I think, for what for its potential, and that's probably not the importer's fault. That's probably just the source pricing, but it's almost there. And, people often, I don't know, people have asked you guys, what do you think of the Ignis? And, they're a bit shocked when they realize how small it is, but the styling certainly catches your attention, and it's a good-looking thing, and it's probably got the best Suzuki interior at the moment as well.
I love it. I love the Ignis. It's a bit polarizing, though. My significant other felt exactly the opposite about the Ignis, but I really like it.
Totally. I think they should do a sporty version with a nice turbocharged engine, borrow the transmission out of the Swift Sport. And, there you go. You got a light performance light performance SUV.
Yeah. Well, look, on the subject of small cars, Cook chipped in again and said he noticed that I'd mentioned that the new Fiat 500 was way bigger than the original 500 from the 50s and 60s and on. And he has a photograph, which people on YouTube will be able to see, which is his Smart for 2 next to an original 500. Now, when I see a Smart on the road, you just think, gosh, that thing is so tiny. Well, have a look at that photo. It absolutely monsters the old 500. And De Cook makes the point, the oldie would sit 4 and often carried 6, with 4 kids in the back when you're really pushing it. And he's so right. And he agrees with Steve Corby, who made the point that he was sorry to have seen Smart go from this market because De Cook, as an owner and what have you, when he was in Germany, sees so much good in it. So interesting point, and it does look huge in that photograph. Now, Shem Mack says, well, you learn something every day. I didn't know that LDV was Leyland DAF, and it was Leyland DAF vans, which was the original meaning underpinning LDV. Surprised they don't have that on their vehicles. And he said, another great show, and that's terrific, thank you, Shem. But Bertie came in and said, as long as they don't use the Marina, Tasman and Kimberley names, they should be good. Perhaps an LDV P76 Mark II, instead of one 44-gallon drum, you can fit 2. So those names, Marina and Tasman and Kimberley, and people on YouTube will see we've got some pics of those amazing vehicles. So fair call, Bertie.
Lay off the Kimberley and Tasman. I think that those cars certainly had the issues, but they were pretty good back in their day. The Marina was, rubbish, but I like it.
To be charitable, the idea was right. The design was right. Maybe it was to do more with execution and where that company was at that point in time, as much as anything else. But I think the idea was right. Now, Luke Holmes had a lot to say. So we'll just kind of paraphrase what he was saying. He made the point that we were talking about the MG Gloucester a couple of weeks ago, the 7-seat SUV that could potentially come here. It's for the Indian market initially. He says, I'm sure you're aware the city and the aeroplane company have a different spelling. We don't want Crafty misspelling his whole review. And you've got, of course, Gloucester, Gloster, is the vehicle and the aircraft. And you've got Gloucester, Gloucester, as the place in the UK. There's a Gloucester in New South Wales and Australia. I'm sure they're all over the place. So fair call, Luke. Thank you. On the Defender, he says he'd buy it. We were thinking it was a little bit pricey. He says the base model is the one he'd buy because of the steel wheels as much as anything else. We were also decrying a relatively disengaged off-road four-wheel drive experience because there are so many systems to help you. It's as if you're just a passenger behind the driving seat. He says that's perfect for him because he has a heavy foot and 2 left hands. So, to go off-road and get all that help is perfect. And he also says, well, where else do you go? Prado, LC200, Patrol, a Wrangler. Then you're into MUX and Everest and Fortuner and Pajero Sport. He's all for it. He likes it. And he said he'd been sitting there for 5 minutes thinking about why he should buy any of those and couldn't come up with a good reason. I thought it was kind of fun.
I have one word to say to that, and that's Bronco.
That's right. That's right. And your feeling and, deep source, deep state intel is that you shouldn't write Bronco off for Australia. Yeah, is that right, Byron?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think Ford is just probably just teasing and trying to get some momentum behind, and just want to make sure that the market is ready, because that thing is obviously right-hand drive ready. I reckon they just want to gauge the market and then press a button. I mean, that thing already is selling. Like, what's the waiting list on it now? Isn't it like 18 months already?
It's yonks. And I suppose when you've got an existing range to sell, you don't want the spectre of a car just over the horizon crueling your chances in the showroom right now. So yeah, it's probably not a bad tactic to keep it quiet, and they probably can't get much production out of the plant right now because it is so popular in the domestic US market.
Exactly, and there's also a lot of next year's Ranger, or the 2022 Ranger in the Bronco, given that they're both T6, and so they probably don't want to draw too much attention to the nitty-gritty stuff of that car. But there's don't be surprised if some of the Broncos features start popping up.
And look, we're still with Luke Holmes. He made a comment on the Battlers and Stellantis, and he said, what a schmozzle. And gold star for use of the word schmozzle there. I think that's outstanding.
Not since Laverne and Shirley. Don't they use the word schmozzle or something in the...
My old mum is a massive schmozzle lover. She uses that word on a regular basis. He says, look, when was the last time you heard of a concept car or a vision for the future for Chrysler or Dodge? It all seems to be about, a depleted product range for Fiat. He does say that the Giorgio platform, which will go underneath various products like the next Grand Cherokee, Chrysler and Dodge products, Alpha as well, that could offer some hope. But he's just very disappointed that there's nothing really happening with that group of brands.
Well, the last concept was actually revealed a couple of weeks ago in the form of the Grand Wagoneer.
Oh, that's true. That's a good point. Absolutely. Yep. Yes, that flies in the face of that. So fair call.
Which is pushing Jeep a little bit more upmarket, a little bit more premium, a bit more luxury.
Yep. I like it. What do you reckon, Tung? Do you like?
Yeah, I think it's a bold move, but I think it's one that they need to make.
I think it's striking. I think it really knocks your eyeballs out. Whether you like it or not, it makes a big visual statement.
Totally.
Yeah. So at the end of all of that, Luke said, that's my opinion piece for the week. Look forward to his check in the mail. You're not going to get it, Luke. Sorry, you're dreaming, mate. You've got no chance. And then we rounded out the feedback with the Lorax, who says, hey, gentlemen, regarding not buying smaller cars, he says he currently has a 2015 Holden Ute, and he uses the length of the tray regularly. So for him, a dual cab Ute is not so great because, yes, you get the extra passenger seat space, but the tub is actually quite small. So he's thinking he's more in for a RAV4, but only if they bring the prime PHEV, because you can actually fit stuff that's just under 2 meters if you configure the interior properly, but he'll only buy it if it's the plug-in hybrid version, which isn't in our market at this point. He says, the RAV4 will carry something 6 foot long with the seats down and undercover. None of the current things with trays can do that. And he says he's an artist and he transports paintings around and he needs that cover like his current Ute has. So he's obviously got a hard tonneau on the Holden Ute. So there you go. Holden Ute to RAV4, which is an unpredictable move.
Is the obvious answer not a wagon?
Maybe. But the choices of wagon have reduced really as well, haven't they?
Yep, that's true.
You could probably get a Mondeo wagon if you're quick.
Yeah, which is a great wagon.
Yeah. Or obviously a ZB Commonwealth if you can find one. I'm sure you'll be able to find a ZB wagon still.
Yeah.
And then, but sadly not the 508 wagon, because as beautiful as that thing is, it's not very capacious, is it?
All right. Well, thank you to the Lorax and thank you to everybody that gave us their thoughts. We couldn't run all of it, but thank you nonetheless. And we'll move to our main topic of conversation, which has proved a bit of a hit in terms of anything we've been running news-wise about this vehicle in the last week or so, and that's the prospect of a GR HiLux, so a Gazoo Racing, a performance version of the HiLux. It's a couple of years away, but our latest mail, courtesy of Andrew Chesterton, says that it's poised to be a bit of a monster. That contrary to other markets, this performance vehicle could have a 3.3 litre V6 to make it what would be the world's most powerful diesel ute, according to Chesto. So that sounds pretty exciting. Tung, you've been wrangling all of this news. What do you make of it?
Yep, I mean, it's what Toyota needs to do. It's what everyone is wanting, The punters want it. Toyota are building their Gazoo racing brand. They've got Supra already. They're coming in with Yaris. They'll have Corolla coming up. It just makes sense for them to expand into the pickup space.
Yep.
You can't leave Ford's Ranger Raptor to hog all the glory, can you?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And I mean, some of the images that we've got, they've already started down that path in other markets. I've got to actually double check whether or not we can access them, but various accessories that start to beef up your HiLux a bit, with a bash plate and side steps and other bits and pieces that give it that more macho look. But yeah, other markets to get a 2.8 litre diesel, which is I think what the car runs now. But with this bigger engine, you're looking at outputs in excess of 200 kilowatts and 650 newton meters, which is plenty. And if you then start to play with suspension, Raptor style, it really gets interesting in that part of the market.
Mm-hmm. But don't get your hopes up too much, because apparently it's not coming until the next generation HiLux.
You took the words out of my mouth there, Tung.
Sorry. Due around 2023, but let's be honest. I mean, Toyota aren't the only brand in that space that are toying around with a V6 for the next generation Ute. Byron, I think you're quite across what Ford are planning with their next Ranger.
Exactly. So, we're talking about cars that are going to get bigger, and let's face it, closer to the Ford F-Series. If not, size, but also definitely kind of toughness and truckness. And you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if the next HiLux really does morph into some sort of American Tacoma, Toyota Tacoma style.
Not quite Tundra, but bigger.
Yeah. So we're and Tung, you're absolutely right. I mean, this platform is ancient underneath the current HiLux. I mean, they've put a lot of lipstick on that thing, and it's a good-looking thing, and obviously sells and appeals. But for them to engineer a V6 diesel so late in its life, for the relatively small volume, I think that it's definitely going to happen. But don't be holding your breath, people.
It's worth pointing out that Toyota Australia has trademarked the name GR HiLux, so we're not talking kind of fairy floss dreams here. It's seemingly real, but to your guys' point, it's when it happens, and not likely with this generation, but 2023.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, of course, Raptor needs to be dealt with. Also the the Gladiator from Jeep needs, you need to put some sting in the tail of the HiLux to get into that kind of level of sports truckdom, and GR is the natural. So of course Toyota's going to trademark the name. As you know, through history, the Japanese car companies in the 60s trademarked pretty much everything English noun they could. Which is still to this day affects everyone. So
and still they went for Celica and
Gloria.
Gloria, yes. But I mean, when you think about the names, you've got Raptor and Gladiator and Gazoo.
You're welcome. I mean, bless you.
But it sparks a thought, Byron, and we were talking about this earlier, that in terms of affordability, price, of course, will be an issue if and when this one rolls around. But utes generally have bucked the trend in terms of affordability relative to a cost of living and income and other factors. Can you fill us in on where you've been on that score?
Oh, absolutely. So a couple of weeks ago, I was playing with the Reserve Bank of Australia calculator.
As you
do. Like us used journos, we like to see what price relativity exists compared to what.
I thought that was the last time you were in the Reserve Bank, you just nicked one of their calculators.
Well, that's true too, but that court case is coming, that's pending, so I can't talk about it. But so the affordability, it was an article that is currently on carsguide.com.au. Check it out, on the real affordability of cars, and I've chosen Toyotas, because Toyotas have been present in every segment that is major consistently for the last 50 years.
Yeah.
So using since we're in a whole number year, 2020, I've gone back 50 years through to back to 1970, well before we were born, James. And what I found interesting is the HiLux bucks a trend. The trend being that using the Corolla, just a base manual Corolla as an example.
Yep.
This year, the new Ascent Sport manual, which is a brilliant little gearbox, by the way, you can buy more manuals, people.
Mm-hmm.
That costs $23,895. But we tend to think, gee, that's a lot of money for a base Corolla manual. But in 2010, adjusted, the equivalent, the 2010 equivalent Corolla manual was $26,000 in today's money.
Wow.
Going back further in 2000, the Sydney Olympics year, a base Corolla was $31,811.
Is that right?
Yep. And so that was, and then it drops back down to 30 for 1990, 25 in $1980, $1980 in today's money.
I see.
And the 1970 KE20, in which our esteemed editor Mal Flynn has a KE20 Corolla.
Yeah, he does.
We should flash a picture of that car up right there somewhere. That car was still $25,781 in today's money. So, so that's the Corolla, and that trend is pretty much mirrored with light cars such as the Yaris / Echo / Starlet, going back to 1996. The Camry. Oh my goodness, the base Camry is $28,990 today. Just 10 years ago, the same car in today's money was $36,500.
Wow!
In 2000, Tung probably knows the answer because his son might work. But do you want to guess how much it was in 2000? How much Corolla base Camry auto was in 2000?
In today's dollars?
Yeah.
Oh, still mid 30s.
$44,407. Yeah.
And when you think about the extra safety, the extra tech that is just baked into every Corolla and Camry model now, aside from just like for like on dollars, like for like on spec, they're nowhere near it.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because in my article I point out that if you spec the safety features that were available, which most of them weren't, back in 2000, 2010, you'd have to go to the $200,000 Lexus LS to get those features. To
get that technology. Yeah, right. Yeah.
So anyway, so the same applies to the Yaris and the RAV4. The RAV4 is actually interesting. The RAV4 is cheaper than ever in real money. Like I use just the base 2-litre GX automatic, which there is a manual version of that, but the automatic obviously is the one. And that car's a gem, by the way. Like it's I love it. Anyway. That car at the moment's recommended retail price is $34,695. 10 years ago, the same type of car with far less equipment, mind you, was $37,000. But in 2000, which I think it was the .com boom and bust year, it was $48,740 for a base 5-door auto RAV. So,
But then the inverse of that is the HiLux.
That's right. So. Today's HiLux, now I use the SR because SR5, because SR5, you may not know, folks, but the SR5 badge has been around since 1979. So no wonder people just default to HiLux.
What does it stand for, Byron? What does it mean?
It's, I'm glad you asked that. I'm not looking at anything here in particular, but it's, I think I wrote it in my review, in my story, Sport Rally 5. Sport Rally 5 for 5-speed manual. Yep, because it gained an extra ratio. In 1979, having a 5-speed truck was, pretty special.
Yeah.
Anyway, so an SR5 dual cab manual petrol is $53,690 today.
All right.
10 years ago, it was $50,000.
Yeah.
20 years ago, it was $44,000, and and these are still the same configuration. Yeah. Obviously, less safety, blah blah blah, and fewer equipment levels. In 1990, it was $39,000. In 1980, it was $27,500. Wow. And in 1970, and the last two two were single cabs only.
Okay.
It was $24,500. So basically, something's happening here. The HiLux and all pickup trucks, it's not just Toyota, all pickup trucks are offer inverse value compared to their passenger car
in terms of
equivalents.
affordability. Isn't that interesting? Wow.
Yep. So traders out there, haggle hard because you're getting ripped off, people. And Jesus, just haggle hard because they must be making hand over fist profit, particularly for the older trucks that, amortize their investment, in 2005. Yeah. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, that is interesting. So, and that story is on carsguide.com.au. So, thank you, Byron. But we better move on. And I'd like to move to our garage and cars that have been occupying it. And normally it's all shiny, fresh metal. But this week, a little bit different. Tung, I want to start with you.
Yep.
You've made a purchase because your car requirements are going to change very shortly.
Yes.
Fill us in on what you've done.
Well, the wife and I, we've been the proud owners of a Volkswagen Up, tiny little 5-door hatchback for a number of years now. But we have the wonderful news that my wife is pregnant, and we're expecting our first child due in the next sort of 3 weeks or so. So of course, we had to sell the Up and get a bigger car. What we decided on was it's a 2015 Skoda Octavia RS wagon. So big boot, lots of space for the child seat, lots of space for the pram, the groceries, everything we need, but still with a punchy 2-litre turbo petrol engine, for when you want to take it for a spirited drive. And of course, the lovely Matthew Pritchard is flashing a picture of it up on screen now. I can't help myself.
What about the normal Matthew Pritchard? Have we got another Matthew Pritchard working for us?
He's away on holidays.
Where'd that come from?
The voice of God.
Yes. But with all cars that I own, I cannot help myself. I need to tinker, I need to modify, I need to tweak and change. So in addition to having a child seat installed in the back, I've got some wider 19-inch wheels on it, and I've lowered the suspension. So, hopefully it'll drive a little bit better, and it'll keep me entertained for the years to come that I'm going to own it.
Now, we've had commentary before from some of our listeners and viewers saying that Skoda and the Octavia in particular seems to be a real favourite with motoring journalists, that there are quite a few who own them. Richard's in a Skoda at the moment. Who else there are colleagues that have them, aren't there, Till?
There are a few. I won't name them all.
Can I interject? I might interject. The great Peter Robinson has a Skoda Octavia wagon.
Does he really?
As his retirement car.
Wagon,
so
right. So it's an RS or a non-RS?
No, he's got one. He like the RS, he's got the one with the independent rear suspension. So he's got a higher powered 4-cylinder turbo. The name escapes me. I think it's either 132 or 140.
Okay.
TSI, does that ring a bell, Tom? Or that era? Because he bought generation. He's like yours. His is 2015.
Yep.
So if Tung and Robbo have a
well, that's a ringing endorsement.
That is absolutely
all right.
The running gear and technology of a Volkswagen at a more affordable price. As long as you're not a bad snob, Skodas will fit the bill quite easily.
And it fits all. It ticks all of that in terms of pragmatism over flashiness and it's a thinking person's choice. So well done, Tung.
But also, it's a damn good-looking wagon.
Yeah.
It's handsome. True. And Tung's, as you can see from the photo that the lovely Matthew Pritchard has put up, he's modified it slightly. And it lends itself to that sort of shenanigans, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
Very good. Now, look, thank you, Tung. We'll move on. And Byron, people who have tuned in when you've been part of the podcast cast before will know that you do own several vehicles. You have more than a handful, and you've added to that little portfolio, and you're in it right now. So
I am. Look,
what you've purchased.
So we're going back in time. We're stepping back in time, just like Kylie Minogue, to 1990, the year that song came out to, by the way.
Okay.
And I am in the back of an EA Series 2 Ford Falcon, which I purchased last month from the lovely Gage Rowe who is one of our viewers.
Okay.
Although not through this show. And I picked it up for $1,500, and it is basically a one-owner base model GL automatic with a 3.9 throttle port injected engine, and it's in Chardonnay. So I'm sure the lovely Matthew is now, we're panning across this car's beautiful Clive Potter designed flanks.
Yeah.
I have always thought that the EA Falcon, I always thought that this car was the prettiest Falcon ever. Not the most handsome in the XY, and even, FG or BA XR8 or GT sort of way, but just pretty. This car is, in my opinion, a design masterpiece. That is right up there with the VE Commodore as just timeless Australian design. And like you can see, I'm sitting in the back seat. Earlier today, one of you guys was commenting on the
quarter window.
The quarter window. That's right. It's evocative, and this car was a very modern car in 1988 when it was released. It replaced the also modern XD Falcon, but that car was very influenced by the Ford Granada. This car, although Peter Carter did a great job there, this car here was very much a Ford Australia effort during a time when Ford Australia was riding the crest of the wave of popularity, and they were just the jewel in the Ford Motor Company crown, and they came up with this absolute design masterpiece. I feel less so about the wagon, which I think is still a good-looking thing, but the sedan particularly. I've always loved it. I love looking at this car in the same way that I had a Citroen DS, and I will have another Citroen DS if I have a chance, if I ever get money. But man, I look at these cars I'm not saying it's the same, it's in the same category, but just it's interesting design. I love interesting design, and this is what this car represents. And for $1,500, and this car's a rust-free, clean, never crashed, everything working.
That's amazing.
Example.
That's amazing. I remember being at the launch of that car, the long lead magazine launch at the Yuyangs, and driving an EA around their high-speed track, and thinking, this is quite a car. It was in response to VN, which had come at roughly the same time. It seemed as though it had a stance and a kind of completeness to its design that the Holden didn't quite have.
And this being an EA2 has the 4-speed automatic, which was the transmission originally designed for the overhead cam 3.9, which, by the way, this is the era also when Ford went from the overhead valve to the overhead cam, or the push rod to the overhead valve cam engines. And it's far from perfect, and it's still a little bit of a barge to drive today. I mean, Falcons have always have driven well, but they never really became world class, I think, until the BA.
So does it has its alloy head badge on the side of the car?
No, that was the previous generation. So that alloy head badge denoted the Honda built alloy head that came out in the 1980 XD Falcon Series 2.
Was it? Okay.
And carried on through to pretty much, I think, through to the XF. Maybe the XF lost the badge. I can't remember. Okay. I'm sure someone will tell us, but and so it's it's in. I'm in the back seat. Hold On by Wilson Phillips has just played because it's 1990, and Maxi Priest is about to come on, and I feel that too. Like I was in my early 20s at the time, in 1990, and I remember thinking, gee, we're lucky to have such beautiful cars on the road that we've all kind of got spoiled by them being cabs and breaking down and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It's, I don't know how long I'm going to keep this car, but it's certainly fulfilling that part of me that's a bit nuts, but also
that is brilliant. That is a fantastic acquisition. Congratulations.
Thank you, James. I appreciate that.
Well, I'll finish it off by saying that in the last week I've been in a Volkswagen Touareg, the Adventure, which is a special edition, and it's just over $90,000, like $91,000 before you've put it on the road. It's based on the 190 TDI Premium, which is actually an $87,000 odd car. So it's a few $1,000s more than the car it's based on, and it gets a whole bunch of stuff. Some cosmetic, aesthetic, some of it more meaningful. You get additional advanced off-road settings for gravel and sand, so that's where the adventure bit comes in. You actually drop down from a 20-inch wheel to a 19, and the tyres are a little bit more attuned to actually heading off-highway. And you get some nice leather interior, two different colour options. The area view, park assist, roof bars, various other accessories, a whole bunch of stuff. So it's a 3-litre turbo diesel V6, 8-speed auto, all-wheel drive, 190 kilowatts, 600 newton meters, which is plenty. And that's all available from 2250 RPM. And the plus column, I gave it ride comfort, is amazing. That Touareg, it reminded me, I went to the launch of this car, and that air suspension works magic. It's incredible how beautifully that car rides. The torque, all of that 600 newton meters is just there when you need it. It's so enjoyable to drive because it just has so much push in the mid-range. The seats are very nice too. The front seats more particularly, because that's the one I was occupying. Heated and cooled, by the way, but the shape of the seats are extremely nice. And just the overall refinement of that Touareg package is super impressive. Look, on the negative side, it has four-wheel steer, this adventure model, as well. And despite that, I'd say there's not exactly an intimate relationship between your hands and what the front wheels are doing. Yeah. Okay, it's not a sports car, it's a big SUV, but still, you'd just like a little more connection. This car has the standard dash, so analog dials with a little digi panel in between. Whereas if you go for your Innovision package, which is $8,000, you'll get your big fancy digi screens and a bigger multimedia screen. But I'd say you don't really need that. I found this car to be perfectly workable and very attractive in terms of its interior design. And this car was finished in Satura beige, metallic. But that's an extra $2,000, so you're paying $2,000 for metallic paint, which to me seems a little bit steep. But the interior and that exterior colour, for mine, worked very well together, and I enjoyed driving that car thoroughly during the week. It was a real pleasure. So, yep, it's a fair chunk of change, but if you're in the market for one of those big SUVs, I think they could maybe think about a 7-seat option, because it seems almost obscene to have such a big vehicle, and it's just a 5-seater. But, yeah, really enjoyable.
Jobs, just wondering... obviously that car has a relationship with the Audi Q7. Do you think that the car puts that car in perspective, or as maybe...
It does. When you think about Cayenne and Q7 and the Bentley Bentayga and the Volkswagen Touareg, and all of them running on, what is largely the same underpinnings.
Lamborghini
as well, yeah.
Sorry?
The Lamborghini Urus.
Lambo Urus. When you think about that Volkswagen at that price, it is such a great car. And relative to other 5-seat SUVs, yeah, it's on the expensive side, but relative to the other cars based on that platform, it's brilliant value.
Yep.
I think it shines a fairly harsh light on the Q7 because it's very good. And speaking of nice, it's now time for Musk Watch.
Musk Watch.
Right. So we were talking last week that Battery Day, this big Battery Day was coming up, and sure enough, it's happened. It was a shareholder meeting, and there were also lots of announcements during this thing. It was very odd because it looked like a drive-in movie. There was a stage and people in their Teslas in a car park taking in everything that was said and put up on a giant screen, and weirdly beeping their horn in approval for various things. It was an incredible nerd out in terms of Tesla-ness. But the lots of stuff, the key takeout was a new battery cell. So it's being referred to as the biscuit tin battery cell. It's much more efficient. It's a little way off for production, but it's going to offer allegedly a 16% improvement in vehicle range. Also spoke about a single piece front and rear pressing for upcoming models, but that's getting much closer to being production ready. And also the big news was a Model S Plaid that's been much spoken about, but now it's available for order. So it's ludicrously fast. It's beyond ludicrous. It's actually Plaid mode. But also a new affordable Tesla, as in a $25,000 model, probably called the Model 2, in 3 years. And that just seems like another big deal, like let's make some big noise. But E.W. Niedermeyer, who's communications director for a mob called PAVE campaign, which is Partners for Automotive Vehicle Education, so he's all about autonomous vehicles, says on Twitter, this is the great filter. If you believe this, you'll believe literally anything Musk says. He says he hasn't noticeably changed anything about his approach to building better manufacturing culture since it led into the biggest manufacturing debacle in modern automotive history. Says he's still reinventing instead of continuously improving. And I thought that was a really interesting point, and it got me thinking about some of the promises that Elon has made that are still yet to be fulfilled. And you might remember that this year we were meant to be amongst 1 million robo-taxis on the road because they'd all be autonomous vehicles. And I found a Reddit thread from a guy called Musklum. And in September 2015, Elon said that we would have fully autonomous vehicles by 2018. In 2016, October 2016, he said there will be a fully autonomous demonstration drive from LA to New York by the end of 2017. And then in May 2019, he said Tesla cars will be able to operate without any driver intervention by 2020. So here we are in September 2020. He said we're going to have a $25,000 fully automated and autonomous Model 2 Tesla about 3 years from now. So I think there's a pattern here, and it'll be very interesting to look back in 2023 and see where we're at.
Totally. I want it to happen. I would love more affordable Teslas, electric cars for the masses.
Yeah.
Like you've laid out, JC. Mr. Elon Musk has a bit of a habit or a history of over-promising and under-delivering.
Yeah. Look, others come in just to play devil's advocate on my own bit. He's delivered spaceships. He's delivered rockets. He's brought each of the models that he was talking about to market, although I think it was 3 years ago, the semi was first shown, and there's no sign of the Roadster and any of those. But he eventually kind of gets there. I think it's the overpromise and the slow delivery is more the thing. Yeah,
I agree, James and Tung, and also you got to look at the success of the three. I mean, that car is, and that is the crowning glory here in a way, because it is much more affordable than an S or an X, and people even in sedan-hating America, I don't know if they love sedans, but SUV-loving and truck-loving America, they've embraced that car, and it's already the history's best-selling electric vehicle. Yeah, the fact that he's thrown down this gauntlet and said, "This is what we're aiming to do in 3 years' time," should strike fear in every other car company. And I'm talking not fear, like panic, not just fear.
Maybe.
It might be a year late. It might even be 2 years late, and it might be $30,000. But even then, I mean, we're talking US, so but still a $40,000, Model 2 in Australia would, I think, it would just smash it, don't you think?
I suppose so. I suppose the cynic in me says there's a certain amount of stock manipulation here. The big announcement is always to drive a surge in the stock price.
Mate, whatever it takes to develop his car.
I suppose so, but it gets to... we'll deal with that later when we look at the share price for Tesla. It's an interesting one to come back. All right?
Which we can't be too far away from.
That's right. But then also on Twitter, Elon put out a tweet saying, if you feel Neuralink might have incorrectly overlooked your resume or declined to make an offer, please let me know in the comments below. Because he put out a shout out saying, look, if you've got experience with phones and wearables and inductive charging and power management and all these things, get in touch with engineering@neuralink.com. So he said also in a follow-up, A prior track record of exceptional achievement in engineering is required, but no prior experience working on the brain or human physiology is required. We'll teach you what's known about the brain, which is not much, to be honest. So, that's what he says on Twitter. So Omri Heifler said, just so you know, you have missed out on the best microfabricator in Tel Aviv. And then he says, sounded more impressive in my head. And then Josh says, didn't even acknowledgement, fabrication engineer position. And then he came in again and said, not doing myself any favors by forgetting how to write. And Tysard said, hello, Mr. Musk. I am 100% unqualified, but I've been sealing electronics for years using Ziploc plastic bags. Please consider hiring me at Neuralink. Sometimes I'm funny, and that's got to count for something. So I hope Tysard gets a run. But
I'd hire him.
Yeah. Also on Twitter, Elon put out just a one-line tweet saying, of course I still love you. Right? And that actually relates to one of two drone ships that SpaceX uses to recover stuff that's been jettisoned by rockets taking off or coming back to Earth or whatever. The other one's called Just Read the Instructions. So there's, of course I still love you, and just read the instructions. But most people took that tweet at face value. And Christina said, you're the reason I get up in the morning. And I thought, that's really dire. If Christina is using that as motivation. DAF, so I'm not sure what D is, but it's AF, it says, is everything okay at home, Elon? Which I thought was very caring and charitable. But Nathan Johnson killed it by saying, thank you, Daddy Musk. I love you too. Now choke me. which I thought was really funny. But the share price post, shareholder meeting and battery day is $380.36, and it was $441 last week. So there's been a fall, quite a distinct fall after battery day. And I looked at Roadshow by CNET, and they are saying that despite a lot of good stuff that was put out there, including the $25,000 Model S and all that stuff, the market is saying, look, it's all 3 years out. There's nothing that's going to impact the business in the short term, and that's what they're about. So they actually, a lot of people sold off and they made their recommendations on the basis of, not much to see here because it's not benefiting the company in the short term. So there you go. And I think with that, we have reached the finish line. And I want to say thank you, Tung.
Thank you.
And thank you, Byron.
Thank you, James and Tung.
And thanks to our digital sensei, interpretive dance tutor, and direct debit specialist, Mr. Pritchard, for bringing this schmozzle together. Today he's wearing a t-shirt saying, I may be wrong, but it's highly unlikely. Chicken drumstick pants and LED Batman sneakers. Please pass on the word about the podcast and let us know your thoughts by searching for CarsGuide on Facebook and Instagram using the hashtag CGPodcast, or email us at comments@carsguide.com.au. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, please rate and review us, and remember you can watch us on YouTube. But before we go, I was in an Uber this week and we were pulled over for a random breath test. Cop asked the driver for his license. He hands it over and the cop says, it says here, you're supposed to be wearing glasses. The driver says, I have contacts. The cop says, look, pal, I don't care who you know, you're supposed to be wearing glasses.
Very good.
Oh, dear.
There it is.